All right. Kyle, go ahead and lead us off here.
Right. So, uh, welcome, Nate. Thank you for joining us. Sorry you missed out on our first session 0, but like to go over your character sheet, and I know you've got um, self-professed a lot to say on the matter. So, looking forward to hearing that. I wonder if I share my screen in Discord, that mess anything up. Um,
It might, but I can always play around. It definitely did. Um, that's fine.
my bad.
It's all good.
But
Sounds
this way, this is looking at Nathan's character sheet. So I figured we all could take a look this way. Um, so a couple things for you, Nate. Just going over the basic rules of your character uh, sheet. From the looks of it, you did everything creation wise perfectly fine.
okay.
So you look good. Um, but just going over some of the game details in case you're like, oh, I didn't realize that's how this works. I might want to change something up. Um, so in our games of Blades in the Dark, unlike some of our other games like Monster of the Week, where I might be like, roll cool or give me a sharp roll, in Blades in the Dark, you as the player get to choose how you want to roll and what your character's doing. So I might say, give me a roll, and you can be like, well, based on what I'm doing, I think I'm surveying the situation. Let's roll survey, right? So you have control of that. It'll be rare to non-existent where I'm like, I need a study roll. Um,
Oh,
and so that being said, any attribute you have dots in could conceivably be used for any role. An example I gave uh, to the players in session 0 is, let's say you need to get information from someone in a bar. Your natural instinct might be like, I'm going to go up and consort with them, kind of do the friendly approach, be like, hey friend, like I hear you're working on the docks, there's some interesting scuttlebutt, how about we talk about it. um, Likewise though, you might decide you want to go up and roll wreck, in which case like you go up, smack the glass out of their hand, rough them up a bit, um, and that's perfectly fine too. You're just making ones with a consort roll, ones with a wreck, where that has consequences is where I will decide the position and the effect you take. So if you try to roll something in Roll20, it'll have you select a position and an effect. The default position is risky and standard effect, but uh, different things can uh, give you modifiers to those, which during play I will let you know if your position or effect is affected in some way. Um,
yeah.
the positions start at risky as your default. You can go one up from there, which is a controlled position. A controlled position, um, the the consequences of a failure or a mixed success are reduced. So you're not likely to take harm from a controlled position. You're not likely to completely lose your shot at doing what you're doing. Um, but like you may lose a bit of position, right? Like if you fail on a control position, you could take the action again, but you'd be at a risky position, for example. The next position down is a desperate position. This is where the effects of failure and mixed results are a lot more severe. So this is where you could take a lot of harm, up to and including just fatal harm. You're dead. um,
Oops.
Now, the deal though is one of the ways you gains experience is rolling desperate rolls. So uh, you kind of have to budget how you feel about that, right? The effect starts at standard and can go up to like great effect, and it can go down to no effect. And that's the way of the GM to be like, I'll let you roll it, but you have no effect. Um, the reason you're allowed to do this is because if you crit, one of the effects of a critical is increasing your effect level by one. So a no effect on a crit could go up to a limited effect. So I
Oh,
don't.
okay.
In play, we'll find out how you seduce the wall, right? Something that had no effect, you crit. Now it's limited effect. We'll see how that plays out. Um, so it looks like you have it right. At character creation, you can't have any attribute higher than 2, which you don't. At after character creation, as you start spending XP, you can't have any rating higher than 3 until our crew levels up enough to get a mastery advancement, which will allow us to take that 4th dot.
Okay.
When you need to roll an attribute, you roll dice equal to the number of dots you have in that attribute, and roll 20 will kind of do this for you. If you have no dots, you roll 2 and you take the lowest.
Okay.
And when you do that, obviously that can never crit, and you can only ever crit in something that you have 2 or more dots in, or somehow manage to get more dice, right? The other thing to note, right? So if you see here in your insight tree, like you have 2 horizontal in survey, um,
Yeah.
and like you have 1 here in study, but there's also this vertical column that is formed. So when you consider your insight trait, you have 2 dots in insight. It is counting the vertical dots. Likewise, you have 0 prowess, right? Um,
Yeah. I paid
so
people.
the horizontal rolls are for the things that you roll in game, right? The actions that you take as a character. These vertical rolls are used for 2 things. One, when you reduce your stress in downtime, you take your lowest result. So for you, that's going to be prowess rolling 2 dice and taking the lowest, and you remove that amount of stress.
Okay.
Um, Likewise, there's a resistance roll. So whenever I give you a consequence of an action, because again, much like Monster of the Week is supposed to go, I don't roll for the enemies, right? Like the damage they do, the actions they take are all in response to the rolls you make doing an action.
Mhm.
Um, if at any time you want to resist that effect, right? You want to be like, I don't want that to happen. Like an example I gave was you're running, jumping across rooftops. You fail your prowl roll to jump and make it to the next rooftop. You fall 5 stories to your death. Your character's toast, and you could be like, I want to roll resistance and avoid that. And maybe that looks like you're you're hitting awnings and breaking your fall in some way. But what you do is depending on what's being targeted, you would roll one of your vertical attributes. So if it's a mental effect, you'd roll your insight. If it's a physical effect, you'd roll your prowess. And if it's a social effect, you'd roll your resolve. And when you resist an effect, you immediately take 6 stress, and then you roll the dice, and you can reduce the stress by the highest number rolled.
Okay.
Um, so for rolls, a 1 to 3 is a failure, just a flat failure. A 4 to 5 is a success with a complication. And only on a 6 is it a flat success. You get off scot free, nothing else goes wrong. On 2 6s, it's a critical hit. So not only do you get a flat success, but you do a success with +1 effect. Now, that being said, because anything other than a 6, you're taking some form of complication or not succeeding. Like it can be very difficult to succeed, but there's ways that you can mitigate this. So the first thing you can do is push yourself. So you take 2 stress, which is marked over here, and you just fill in 2
Mhm.
flags, um, and you give yourself +1 dice to that particular roll. You can get help from someone, and only you can only get help from one person. Like multiple people can help you, but mechanically you can only get the +1 dice. In which case they take 1 stress and you take 1 dice. The other thing you can do is accept a devil's bargain. So this is something that you as the player can always feel free to ask. I, as a storyteller, at times may offer you one, and any other player, if if they're watching the story unfold and like, whoa, 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 I have a great devil's bargain for this, they can jump in and offer one as well. But essentially, you'll hear the devil's bargain, so it might be like, hey, I'll give you a +1d on your skirmish roll, but the devil's bargain here is that the person you're about to skirmish with is connected to the bill hooks, and they're going to hear that you're messing with one of their gang, and there's going to be consequences for it. So you can always hear devil's bargain. It's on you whether you, as the player, whether you want to accept it. So you can be like, no, the consequences are too heavy. I'm good, or you could be like, yep, let's do it up and see where it goes.
Yeah.
The other things that can uh, help is someone can set you up, or you can help set someone else up where you make a roll. You don't do anything necessarily with that roll, but the person you're assisting gets a +1 effect, right? So you could be like, I'm going to lure someone in an alley so that uh, Powell's character can line up a shot from a bell tower, right? And you'd maybe roll consort to get someone in the alley. And if you succeed, you'd give Powell +1 effect, maybe bringing his effect from standard up to heightened. Um, the other thing that can be done is you can lead a group action in which uh, let's say, for instance, you guys are stealthing through a place, right?
Mhm.
And everyone kind of needs a stealth, but not everyone has prowl. Someone can choose to lead a group action. So let's say in this case you have 0 prowl. So let's say my character with 2 prowl is going to lead a stealth action. Anyone who wants to benefit from that action can roll their prowl. So in your case, if you want to benefit from this, you're rolling 2, taking the lowest. But I'm rolling all my prowl, and anyone else is rolling all their prowl. I, as the leader of the group action, am allowed to take the highest results. So if we get sixes across multiple people, that's a crit, right? However, for every player who fails, I take 1 stress as I'm like ripping my hair out trying to help you guys through this.
Fucking stomping.
Yeah. Um, cool. So up here, stress is something you'll manage in the game. We've already talked about a few ways you can use your stress. The other thing that will cause stress is calling flashbacks during a score. So if it's a minor flashback, you'll take 1 stress. If it's a major flashback, you'll take 2 stress. And um, uh, you may or may not have to also roll in a flashback scenario as well. Stress is reduced only as one of your 2 downtime activities. You can choose to reduce stress, in which case, again, you choose the lowest of your attributes, your prowess, and you reduce the amount of stress as the highest dice result. Um, if ever you fill up your 9 stress boxes and you take +1 more stress, you move into trauma, in which case you have to take one of these adjectives for your character, which is kind of like a role playing
Yeah.
uh, thing. Um, trauma can never be reduced, unlike harm or unlike stress. Sorry. And once you hit 4 trauma, it's kind of like humanity. Your character's kind of toast, right? You're not in a good way to live this scoundrel life again. Um, if you roll over your stress, so let's say we've finished a score, you're at 3 stress, we're doing downtime, and you roll a 4. So you've cleared your stress +1. You've overindulged your vice, and there are consequences that
Oh,
result from that.
that's
Um,
not.
yeah.
No one
Uh,
can do it.
as far as harm, so the way harm and healing works is you have these 3 boxes. These are what happens if you're in that box. So with level 1 harm, you're taking a -1 effect. At a level 2 harm, you're taking -1d to your rolls. At level 3, you can't do any action unless someone is using their turn to help you. Um, harm moves down when you heal. So when you heal, all level 1 harm gets removed. Level 2 drops to level 1, level 3 drops to level 2, etc. If ever you take level 4 harm, you're just instantly killed. Um,
Or maimed. Like,
or yeah, otherwise taken out. For healing, healing is only done during downtime. This is another downtime activity. When you heal, you roll 1 dice plus a dice for any physicker that you have on hand, and luckily our crew has 2. Peter's 1 and Charles has a contact, so if we're able to get both of them in the same room, you could perhaps get 3 dice. On a 1 to 3, you fill up 1 segment. On a 4 to 5, you fill up 2 segments, and on a 6, you fill up 3 segments. So it'll never be the case that you can instantly heal your clock, except if you're a cutter. I think they have a special ability that they always start with 1 clock full or 1 segment full.
Okay.
But uh, once you complete the clock, all your harm gets dropped down to level. If you're working on a healing clock and then you go on a score and you take harm, your healing clock resets to 0. So be wary of that.
Okay.
The armor over here, armor something that you can have with load. You can see here for 2 load you could have armor. For 5 load you could have heavy armor, and some special abilities give you a special armor. Armor is an automatic pass on a resistance roll. So if there's a consequence you don't like, you could be like, I'm going to use my armor to negate that effect. Cool. So yeah, play is broken down into 3 parts. The first is free play, which is kind of what you've come to expect with the way we do our games. You know, you find out what's going on, you have little scenes and stuff like that with you and the other characters. The next is the score. And free play is done in kind of real linear time. Then you have the score. This is where you can start flashing back to things and kind of have that Edgar Wright style editing. That's where you'll pick your load, we'll roll engagement, and you do your thing. Then afterwards, you'll have your downtime. During downtime, which is the final thing, and this will be done kind of montage or short scenes when we roll our game. You will be able to do, we'll find out, you'll get paid for your score. We'll find out any entanglements and how reputation increased or decreased based on what you did. And then you can choose 2 downtime activities. And those are as follows. So you can reduce stress, which we talked about. You can reduce heat for your gang. You can start a long-term project, which when you finish watching the video, you'll see some other pages of Roll20 where we can track long-term projects of people.
Okay.
You can gather information on one of the other factions' clocks. So I can show you those as well. But other factions are planning stuff that we don't know about. You can find out what they're working on, and we can determine whether we want to stop it. And then you can acquire an asset. And that would be something that it like the acquire asset roll would be for something you could use on your next score. It's like getting a consumable essentially. So it might be like getting a bomb or like getting a healing elixir or something like that, right? Cool. So the way you level up your character, I think the final thing. So as said, when you make a desperate roll, you mark one of these flags in an attribute for each desperate roll you make during a game in that specific thing. So if you're making a desperate survey, you have to put a flag in insight, right?
So
Then at the end of the game, you're awarded 1 XP to a maximum of 2 per bullet point here. That is unique to your playbook. So for you, if you addressed a challenge with calculation and conspiracy, you'd get 1 XP. If you've done that multiple times in this game, you'd get 2 XP. Now, this XP you can either spend in your playbook or you can spend in one of your skills. When you fill up your playbook, you can take another special ability. When you fill up a skill, you can take another dot in that attribute. The other thing I failed to mention on downtime activity that you could do is train, in which case you get 1 flag in uh, an attribute, and as smugglers, we actually have prowess training. So whenever we train in prowess, you get 2 flags instead of 1 flag. Also, I don't know if you want to just remember this or mark it on your character sheet, but we did choose renegades as our smuggler special ability. So you can,
It's marked here.
yeah. So you get to add +1 rating to your finesse, prowl, or skirmish, your choice. And so,
I can get back here and just add to one of those.
yep.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure which one I want.
Fair enough. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You can only have 4 coin at one time. Looking right here.
Mhm.
Any additional coin you have to put in your stash, and if you were to take coin away from your stash, um, it's there's a conversion rate of for every 2 coin you remove from your stash, you can get 1 coin on hand. Um,
Okay.
and you can only have stash equal to the tier of your crew. So as you can see here, we have 4 different ticks for the 4 tiers of our crew. Right now we're tier 0, which means we don't have a stash. So anything in excess of 4 coins, we're kind of screwed. But as you can see here, we do have coin that we can place in uh, our gang holdings as well.
Mhm.
Coin can be spent for a couple things. I go over these in the rules, but the major thing is you can spend 1 coin to get an additional downtime activity, or you could spend in a coin to increase an effect of a downtime activity roll. Um, and then the house rule for missing games is at the start of a game where you are returning after a period of absence, you'll get to make some additional downtime rolls for each game you missed. So if you missed two games, you'd get to roll 2 downtime rolls at the beginning of the game, plus your normal 2 at the end of the game for your downtime.
Okay.
I think that's everything. Charles, Tiffany, was there anything that it seemed like I missed? Anything that you remembered?
I think that was it.
Yeah, I think you covered it well.
Cool. Awesome. So I'd love to hear about your character. I also would love some more information about your shrewd friends and who exactly they are.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen now.
So I think I'll just do a brief. Like I know you gave a very adequate one, and you were not wrong that I am a horrible person, and that will become even more apparent by the end of this, because I'm just not a good person. So Silas, he is Silas Netherton, though he tried to keep that under wraps by using his mother's maiden name, Silas Eventide. He was part of a noble house of Scovlin before, or he was born very early days of the war, and lived his childhood. He was kept the knowledge of the war was kept from him, and he really wasn't made aware of it or what his family's role was in it until he was an adult or came of age, and then that's some of these activities were the fact that his grandfather, Lord Vallo, was um, like allowing them, like getting contracts for blood processing plants readily, and did not care about his Scovlanders or the environment of Scovland or anything like that. Just make the house the money, 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 and go with the side he clearly knew was going to win, the Imperium. It is called the Imperium? Yes, no?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Okay. And at some point in the war, Ravallo died, and Silas's uncle took over the house. And before that, so Silas's grandfather is said to have been really, really good at preparing for the future, to the point where Some people said, oh, he just was really good at planning and just had the experience, where there were others in the family who was like, no, he just has the gift of prophecy. He knows what will happen. And he basically was able to predict several things that were going to happen to the house and plan for them well ahead of time. Um, his uncle, Thelian, was not someone who had this foresight, but was still pretty shrewd and ruthless. So he thought would think on his feet really quickly. So once the contracts were canceled by the Imperium, he switched to trafficking of the refugees and charging them basically anything they had left to their name in order to do this, and taking advantage of the fact that depending on these refugee situations, they couldn't afford to say no, and would sometimes try and argue the whole "we're risking our lives, doing this for you," blah blah. Even though that the way, and particularly when Silas became, there was substantially less risk on House Netherton for what was going on. They were just being pieces of shit. Um, then now Silas seems to have also, in a certain sense, inherited his grandfather's gifts, because he had prepared in advance for what might happen. Like he had always kept a personal stash of the treasure acquired from exploiting these people. And so when the Imperium decided, not only are we canceling all the contracts, but we need to get rid of any nobility in Skovlin to prevent any kind of claims to the throne or government or anything, he other houses basically around. He knows he's the only living member of his house. And his house was likely taken down fairly quickly because it was a turncoat house. It didn't have the help or protection from other houses. He then, on one of his own boats, described himself as a refugee, took a lot of treasure, and set up in the night market as a legitimate businessman and pillar of the community that is, of course, a front for all of his criminal activities. Um, he is very handsome. He wears always the best clothing all the time. He is of noble background. Luxury is his vice. And for his special ability, I chose so 2 times per square I can assist a teammate without paying stress. And say how I prepared for it. I used the when I was putting out dots, I used the what was it, a build that an example build that I think just worked very well. Let me see here. The conductor build, which is +2 command, +2 survey, and foresight.
Cool.
I think that's it for just base character description. My shrewd friend. So Salia, an information broker. I think she is someone who is either with the hive or has close contacts with the hive and has been responsible for a lot of the scores he did even before the crew and getting him information in order to do that, and has a very good relationship with her, and it's just an all-around useful individual for him. And his negative shrewd friend is Jaren, a blue card archivist, and I think he is someone, as it describes in this, as an overly curious officer who is interested in my crimes and probably has some inkling of the stuff I've done and is just really, really wanting to peg me for something. And so the fact that we also have negative with the blue coats, like I saw that and I was like, yeah, no, that's even to build on top of that. So he's got an information broker, and he's got someone who kind of wants to figure him out, and will probably go to many lengths to try and peg him as a criminal rather than a pillar of the community.
Yeah, that's great, because I know Nebra has some a blue coat rival as well, if I
Yeah.
recall correctly. Yeah.
I don't have a rival necessarily, but I do have a negative,
Oh, that officer who.
an officer of the Bluecoats. Yeah.
Yep. Very anti-blue coat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually going to bring up, I thought, I remember now, Kyle, that one of the things we kind of glossed over because it was near the end is that we could have chosen to take the Bluecoats at -2 instead of -1, and I was gonna pitch the group on that at some point, because I think it's much more interesting to us if they are more active or if they're hostile versus if they're just a little more suspicious. But I don't want to make that decision without everyone else, right?
I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
could see
yeah.
that also happening. So can we? I mean, throughout play, our reputation will be affected.
Yes,
I can see
100%.
like being the first ones to like get up on our asses because we did something, and in
Yeah,
particular
yeah.
for me, that would be like really bad for me.
Yeah, it'll be a rare game where your reputation doesn't change in some way with someone,
Right.
right? Like everything in this city is owned or claimed, right, by someone else. So whatever you do is stepping on someone's toes and is probably making someone else very happy that you're doing exactly that, right? Um, quick question I had for you with Salia, because I love your backstory with her, thinking that she's someone who is either with the Hive or work closely for the Hive. So are we to understand that uh, Silas was pulling jobs with the Hive even before the crew formed proper, like you already had some inroads with them?
Yeah, I think he
Perhaps
was
as
sort of.
this legitimate businessman?
Well, this will come in the questionnaire as well. At the
Okay.
end, was he or not? And I think yes, I think he was doing sort of independent contract stuff, so it wasn't like direct employment, but it was uh, he would do scores for them just to like his even important thing to him is his lifestyle, and so he was likely working with the Hive because they were the big fish on some level. Um, and so I think he has done jobs in the past for them before the crew was established. Yes. And so I think at this point, unless there's something else, I can move on to the questionnaire.
Sounds
Could I
good.
ask a quick question about Salia? Sorry,
Oh,
just out
okay.
of curiosity. Do you know what her heritage is,
Do I know who you're?
or Salia's heritage? Sorry.
Oh, I think she's probably what's the main one?
Arcarosi.
Akarosi. So
Akarosi.
I will say, Nate, you're free to change the name to make it uh, more suited to what you had in mind. But much like Cameron and Bezo Baz, Salia is a named NPC in Brightstone,
Okay.
and she is a spirit with the reconciled who moves from body to body at her whim, and is also a
Oh,
weird vice purveyor. So that might still work for you and your ideas, but
Yeah,
if you
I
wanted to
also
change, feel
think
free.
he doesn't know that.
Yeah, cool.
I think as far as he's concerned, like whatever body she's currently inhabiting is what her race is.
gotcha. Makes sense.
So once we meet her for the first time in game, that's probably when we'll find out. And he probably, at least at this point, hasn't witnessed her change bodies at all. Yeah,
But it does sound like she might be the one that made the introduction originally to the Hive.
probably, yeah. Because like I was probably doing some of my own personal scores at first when I got there,
Yeah.
when I finally arrived, just to get myself a place to live,
Hmm.
establish some stuff, and then once like I had planned some good scores, she was probably alerted, and they were like, "Oh, let's work with this guy."
Yeah.
Well, and it could be, yeah, because the we've talked about how Sarah, our crew's arms dealer contact,
Yeah,
was how the crew got set up with the Hive. But
yeah,
Salia being the spirit and also a weird vice purveyor, and us being smugglers who smuggle arcane and weird stuff, like there could be perhaps some manipulation there. Like maybe she put in some words to the Hive and kind of started making those arrangements because she wanted someone smuggling the weird stuff, like
Right.
yeah.
maybe there's some question of if she's not pulling our strings, if that seems cool to you.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think that'll work into what I have
And I,
everything.
and I just like the idea that Silas is maybe doing some jobs, and then for the Hive on the Hive's behalf, having worked with this contact, and then comes along and you know has this arms dealer sponsor him essentially to be like, hey, what if this guy puts together a crew that will, kind of work underneath you, that will take some of these things you need done, is really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, no, yes, that works like very well with all the stuff I have. So if there are anything else, I'll start with the questionnaire because this is where the meaty bits will come in. All right. So first question: why did I become a scoundrel? I mean, I was born this way. Um, he basically, particularly, especially in Duskfall, he grew up used being having become accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and he would like to continue living that lifestyle. And the criminal life is the best way for him to do that, given the fact that he doesn't even know what a moral compass is, um, much less even have one. Um, has he ever been locked up? Why? Are any of your friends behind bars? I'm going to say no, he has not. And in fact, he views getting caught and being locked up as really bad because not only does he want to maintain his lifestyle, he wants to maintain his reputation. And getting locked up would maybe affect reputation in a little bit of a bad way. Um, friends or associates he knows behind bars. I think friends is a harsh term. It is likely that anybody he knows who is currently behind bars is someone who fucked up on a job and he made sure they took the fall, or in a score he set up, there was someone there who was earmarked to fall and take the fall for everything. So anyone who he might know in prison, and this could maybe come back to bite him in the ass, is under one of those circumstances. So here's where I had been like walking around like had this next question. I've been going through this all day in my head. The crew. I definitely think I was a founding member of the crew. What I also have here is how I think the crew in its entirety was fundamentally formed, starting with the two starting founding members. Now, from what I understood in watching the video, it seems to me that there are five founders and two that were vouched for. Is that correct? By what I was hearing?
Yeah,
If
I,
you
I
remember.
believe so.
Yeah. So I think one, like at some point, somewhere in some, like either the Centernalia Club or somewhere he was frequenting, he was there and he was very much like putting himself out there and that I'm looking for a job or a score to do. And Emmeline was likely also there and said, "Hey, I've got business to do," and put forth the whole I can do stuff with the weird artifacts and the arcane artifacts. And I might have countered with, "Well, I can smuggle stuff. I just don't know how to do that stuff." And she's like, "Well, I do." And we can start from there. And that was okay, let's start this. Let's start working on a crew. And I think sometime in short order after that is when he meets Reese. And that's through, or he probably knew of Reese before anyway, but this will skip ahead to a little bit. The last time he knifed to someone was he was dealing with someone who fucked up on a job. And I think not unlike Ned Stark, who was like, if you the punishment, you need to be willing to perform that punishment. And where Ned Stark does it out of noblesse oblige, he does it out of like opportunity. Like Ned Stark's obligation, he is like, I get to do this punishment. And was doing that and kind of being nasty about it and kind of going to work on the guy. And then I think for whatever reason, Kyle's character comes in and sees what's happening and sees that this dude's about to die. And given what she knows about people and things like that, likely conferred to him, like, I don't think you want to kill this guy for her knowledge. And Kyle can correct me if I'm wrong on any of that. And then he's like, and I think despite the fact that like the ghost stuff is ever present in this world, Silas did not personally know much about it and really didn't understand the consequences. Like dead men do tell tales potentially, and so he was like, "Okay, we need to get someone to fix this guy up really quick." Brings in, and this is why I asked Peter the question about the Hippocratic Oath, because you remember the movie American Mary and how she got her start. That's what I think mentioned Reese to do, and say, "Hey, I will pay you this boatload of coin. I need him to be alive. I need him to not be able to see. I need him to not be able to talk and not be able to use his hands, but still be able to feed himself," kind of thing. And then we'll cast him out. And if he dies somewhere else, that's fine, but not. Um, and then after that, I think depending on what he judges as Peter's moral scruples, either emphasizes that that might happen more or less, or that he could use someone of his skill set in the crew that they're about to do, and either whether it be healing crew or any other thing he can offer. And then he likely says, "Yes, sure, we're going to be in this crew together. You're going to someone who's physical though, and that's going to be Cole." And he's like, "Okay, I know this guy. He's also a skull. The Skovlander thing is very strong on some level between the three of us, because uh, pressed people, and they all know, and like even Silas knows there are doors right now that won't open for him because he's. Um, and he's like, "Oh, I don't really like the fact that he's in jail. Did he fuck up?" And then it's likely that Reese explains, no, he was stealing food for himself. He needed a job. He doesn't have a job. That's really what he needs. And so I likely go in to the jail and I'm ready to bail him out and get him out. And I I think that the price out as far as Silas goes was so low that he wouldn't even hang an IOU over Cole's head. Like this is like you know what? I got another Skovlander out of jail. That makes me look good. And then says, "Hey, I hear you need a job. I can offer you a job." And he says, "Of course, yes." Then Cameron also mentioned that he thinks he was a founding member, and I think he is someone who also overheard what Emmeline and I were talking about in one of these environments and says, "I have information. I can get you information to get all that done." And then so we all confer together, and we now have two to be named. As far as the other two, I like what Kyle said about like he probably came to us for something, and then after lots of jobs, we get our hound who is likely really really good at his job, and I can't remember what. Um, oh, I remember what um, the character's name Nebra said is that like she has a Skovlander contact, and I think that's really what helped like sell him on it. Silas on is like, "Oh, you Skovlander gave the go ahead for this other person," and even though as a Skovlander, others shouldn't consider his word gold, he definitely considers other Skovlander's word to be gold. So that's how I think the crew fundamentally formed on some level. And yeah, so he was a founding member and is in it to make the money. Next, what?
Quick question, just to be clear, no one else really knows his past, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
none of us.
So
He's kind of
I
keeping
don't
that under wraps.
like he knows some things, and I'll get more into that when for some other questions. So like here, next, so three of us have the same heritage. I don't think now it's possible Peter had any passing knowledge of uh, Skovlin nobility. He might have heard the name Eventide or heard the name Netherton. That's I can ask him about that later. But otherwise, I'll try and make sure people don't know who I am. Eventide themselves was a very low noble house and not really noteworthy for anything. So that's kind of why he also took that name. Um, but I don't think either Peter or Charles or anyone else knows, at least at this juncture. I think he's worried that Emmeline could find out using her ways, but she probably wouldn't give a shit. So, that's how he sees that. But yeah, I think even though Skovlander shouldn't trust him because of his dirty, dirty, dark secrets, he definitely trusts Skovlanders because he knows they'll trust him. His vice is luxury. He grew up with a certain lifestyle. He wants to continue to have that lifestyle and maintain it. Everything he does fundamentally is to get money so he can look the best food, have the best home, just be the best and richest at everything. Like he needs to have the money and just the status. Like that's everything to him is about how rich he can be. Like he absolutely wants the best of everything, and money can buy the best of everything. Um, so Cameron and Emmeline and I have the same background. Again, so I don't know, given their levels of education or um, outside of Duskfall, there is potential. I think if they do know some of them, that they could have heard one of his names. I think he himself likes to carry himself like a noble, even if he doesn't advertise that he was formally. And I think he also recognizes when someone else carries themselves like a noble, and recognize that in both Cameron and Emmeline. And with that, he associates nobility with a certain level of greed, and he trusts that. So those are bonus points to both of them. When was the last time he used his blade? On a person who failed a job, and he's not afraid to punish someone who has failed on a job for him, and try to ensure, if possible, that their soul is also destroyed. So I looked at like the crew who I trust most and least. I think fundamentally the one I trust the most, because I think we understand each other the best, is Emmeline, because she offered him the job. She likely warned him about this is why you might not want to kill everyone who slights you. Um, and I think I think it's also clear to him that she does view him as a father figure, and he doesn't necessarily want to exploit that in ways that like Wilhelm have. But I think because I think the kindred spirit, and they're like, no, she can enjoy the riches just like I can, even if that's not her vice. I think he also trusts the Skovlanders a lot. Um, but I think at first I was thinking he trusted Peter more than like Reese more than Cole, because Cole was in prison. But then I thought of something that switched, because Peter made mention of not saying who his motives were, and I think Silas has kind of noticed that about him, and that he's not really sure where he stands. But one thing he knows for sure is that it's likely he thinks if Cole out about his deep, dark, dirty secret, he would just kill him, and he can trust that at the very least he would get killed, and it wouldn't be worse as someone ratting him out and it affecting his like reputation. He'd rather be killed by someone, and he thinks he can trust Cole to do that if he were to find out. I think on the bottom of the list are, at first I thought it was going to be Nebra for the same reason as Kyle, that she's new. And I think, and she is not really an experienced member of Prime, and this could just be a phase. Dad, it's just a phase, or maybe it's not. But I think he also views her as someone who he could potentially mold into liking it. Where Cameron he trusts the least fundamentally, despite being a noble, because he's vengeance bent, and that means feel this vengeance. How much of his own resources are you going to waste through it, and how much of the crew's resources could he potentially waste?
And also, according to Cameron, that there's a level that the crew doesn't know he's a noble. He actually hides that piece of his history from us, so we think he's just some working class dude hell bent on vengeance.
Yeah,
So
so
he
that's
doesn't
another
even
thing.
have that level of.
So if I wasn't even able to notice that he was a noble, I think he was probably good enough at hiding it. And then on top of the fact, he's clearly vengeance bent, and that can potentially be a liability. And then has any faction tried to recruit me? I think the Hive definitely tried to directly recruit me, and whether it be through Sarah or Salia, I think the deal was, when it came down to it, he started off with the whole, "Nah, I kind of still want to be independent." And to me, the Hive seems like a place that if they actively said, "We want to formally recruit you," they normally people probably don't say no to that, and almost, if just for survival, if
Or
not, don't
never
piss.
found again. If
Yeah, but I think because of his what, Charles?
Well, I was gonna say, like, That sounds really cool. What if, and maybe you already written this, and I'm interrupting to say what you were gonna say, but it's what if his like counter proposal was, yeah, I'm not gonna join you, but what if I build a crew that does the jobs you don't want to be known for?
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll be a tributary to you. Like, and at the end, like where others might want to say, "Hey, someday we're going to take down the big fish," he's not as concerned. He's ultimately more selfish than anyone else. But yeah, I think that's exactly that you made, Charles. Like that's why I was listening to you, watching you guys play. And I'm like, oh no, this is all gonna like fall down like dominoes. Um, because yeah, I think I will do my crew. I will jobs you don't want to do. Um, and yeah, so that's Silas. Unless there's anything I missed.
I know that I also really like that as an aspect because it's not necessarily the jobs they don't want. Like they don't want to do them, but it's not that they don't want them done, right?
Yeah,
So even if they're very anti moving weird artifacts around, you know, it still needs to happen. And if they get to
it's
be,
going to happen.
and it's going to happen, and so they might as well. It's like taxes, right? You might as well tax narcotics or something because it's gonna get
Mhm.
out there.
And I could also put on a face to them of like, hey, because we're moving this, we're it's in our best interest to prevent other people from, and the other people aren't necessarily paying you. We are.
Right.
I dig your thoughts for the you, me, Cameron meetup, because I
Mhm.
have this image in my head of you and I having a very private conversation about the lovely crimes we're about to commit, and then this nobody, Cameron, like pulling up a chair and being like, "So you're talking about crime, huh?" And just being like, "Who is this guy?"
God fucking damn it!
Yeah,
That's
I
very
could do
Cameron
crime.
too to do that. Like,
Yes.
No,
what's
Yeah.
up?
100%.
can I kill him? Can I kill him right now? Like, um, I also I had thoughts on at least the boat name. I think the boat's name should be person's name for the sake of the veil of secrecy when we need to send stuff to the boat rather than something fancy. Though he is totally 100% cool with like slapping another crew in the face that we stole it from and being like ha ha ha. But I do like the idea like in like you see in Gone in 60 Seconds or something like that. Um that
Oh, like an Eleanor or something
yeah, an
like that.
Eleanor or something like that. And I don't have a name in mind, but I think that's a good name idea for the name of the boat. But we can hell, we might not even have it named by first session. We're like, well, we haven't decided yet. Just the boat. Yeah, and that is Silas Eventide.
Does he go by Lord Eventide?
No, because I think he also the deal is he can't advertise that he was noble as
Mm,
much. I think there are Goldlanders out there who recognize the name,
sure.
but they assume that his house was just killed
Got it.
and that he's probably the last scion of this house, even though it was a lowborn house. So there are probably those that might like I could see like a commoner who needs our help coming up and like addressing him that way as sort of a like God like it's like did you didn't even call me Godfather, but this person did like Lord Eventide, I need your help.
Yeah.
But if they say Lord Netherton, he's like,
I kind of like the idea
oh, sure.
yeah, exactly, of someone coming up and you say and saying Lord Netherton, is that you or something, and then he'll be like, Cole, kill this man. Like,
Kill him right now.
yeah, don't let him talk.
Also
He's a
forgot.
liar.
Yeah, on the
Flashpoint.
messenger, I think he's in the little realm of trust versus. He is ambivalent. Like he's a professional that gets the job done and doesn't really isn't concerned with his funny look or his funny animal.
Mhm. Uh,
Just he can come to my club.
and so I'll ask this of you, Nate, and the other two who are here, I'll ask as well because I this is something I kind of forgot to mention um, during our last session. But obviously, we have a quarters
Mhm.
in our lair, so living in the lair is something that can happen. But In your mind, Nate and others, where does your character live? Like, where if someone were to go looking for them on a weekday, where would they search for you?
So I think for Silas, a place in the night market that is he lives in one of his storefronts or business fronts, and that's where we
Like an
go.
apartment above the
Yeah,
storefront or something like that?
yeah. And then, well, because of the district he's in, you can't make the outside look as nice as he would want at this juncture. If you walk inside, it's like beautiful.
I would say Nebra is living with her parents and probably somewhere in the vicinity, like the near vicinity of the Peruvian consulate, which is like is it Charter Hall? Is that
Yeah.
what
Yep.
that region's called? Yeah, so it's probably somewhere.
Okay.
I think Lysander Colburn probably spends most of his time living on the in the quarters, but he does probably maintain a like flat in a flop house, probably like a tenement in um, uh, is it Char Hollow? Is the yeah the place where a lot of the like poorest of the poor Scovelanders are.
Yeah, kind of a Scotland enclave almost.
Definitely a Scotland, yeah, definitely, and probably doesn't even pay rent anymore. Just maybe has like a connection to a like I don't even know if those buildings have landlords or whatever, but I definitely see him.
Where they pay rent to.
Right. I definitely see him being kind of like Gangs of New York style, um, like uh, renting out like his arm kind of thing to to pay the rent if need be. So he'll go rough somebody up to pay for his continued settlement there. Peter on the stream says Reese lives above his storefront in a small shabby market down an alley. So I
Okay.
don't
In
remember.
in night market?
I think so. I think he was in night market, right? He's a night market doctor essentially.
Wait. I know Cameron, based on our discussion, he actually owns a manor home in Brightstone. He's
Yeah.
very well off, but
he,
but based on his backstory, he probably doesn't invite us.
okay, yeah. Pete
But
says it's definitely a night
Yeah.
market. Yeah,
okay.
Cameron's character is actually a lord. Is does actually own a manor house in Brightstone. Has a staff.
When Silas finds out about that, because that
If
could make Silas look bad and not look rich enough.
it's pretty good.
This guy. um,
Yeah,
yeah. So
fucking.
Emmeline obviously has places she can go in 6 hours, right? Her family's estate's still there, though she tries to avoid going back there. I think she would sooner go and stay at Lord Skurlock's manor, who are her parents' neighbors. They're across the canal from one another. But he's got a bound demon who wants her dead, so that's not the safest place to be either. So I think for like years, ever since she left her parents to kind of make it on her own, she's been living in night market, um, and kind of finding residence where she can. Like probably the type of person who wasn't above like taking a lover so she could have a place to stay for the evening. But now that the crew's been established and there's a quarters, I think like maybe like along with Cole, I think Emmeline is there almost all the time. Like I think she's pretty much moved in. Um,
Once we get it like niced up a bit, I might move in.
And now just so I remember, the yep, Peter gave you the title. It's Bangin' for Roof. So he's correct. Um, even if it makes me sad. Um, no, the just so I remember, because we have our not Haven. What's the word called?
Lair?
Lair. We have our lair, and our lair is in Night Market.
Yeah, it's a half sunken grotto
It's a
in
half
Night
second grotto.
Market's
Yeah.
maze like underground canal.
Right. But then we also have our boat. which is cool.
Yeah. And I do boat, like that was when I was watching, I was like, no, we gotta have a boat. Like
Yeah.
that's what we need to have.
Well,
And
especially
in my
with the
mind,
whole
and I think everyone, this might be redundant, but this half sunken grotto, I think, has access for our boat. Like we can park
yeah.
our boat in this grotto,
Yeah.
like, and make it out onto the canals rather sneakily. Like this is probably like, here's the road, and then there's like a sewer grate type thing that leads into the cistern where we kind of have converted. Um,
I love that idea. And our boat basically, just looking at the map of Duskfall, our boat can basically go on the Dusk River in all of the major, like the farthest east and west things, and probably the one that runs east to west next to Night Market, in between Night Market and Six Towers.
yeah. So let me see here. So you have the Dusk River is kind of on the southern tip
Hmm.
of Night Market, close to Gaddock Rail Station.
Yep.
Um, which it's up to everyone, but that might be a difficult or a dangerous spot rather to have our lair, just because the Ministry of Preservation, the rail, there's a lot of
Right.
people regulating that area. But then the river that runs between Night Market and Coleridge
Hmm.
is called the Trade Water.
Oh, okay.
And then the river that runs between, or like the canal, I guess, that runs between uh, Night Market and Six Towers is the Merchant Way.
Okay.
And then the river that's uh, between Night Market and the Deathlands is the Mist.
Gotcha.
There is a
That's
spot called out on the
well.
map called the Grotto. Um,
Oh, is there?
yeah, I currently have an NPC who has a temple there, but we can move them if we want to if we want to steal it for our own purpose. Other than that, at some point, looking at the map, we should probably mark out a couple city blocks for a
Hmm.
tier 0, like a couple city blocks plus water access for where our lair and kind of hunting grounds are. And then as we up in tier, we can go from a couple city blocks to a whole section of the district. Tier 3, we might get a full district, and then we might start expanding out from there. Because you have these sub districts in Night Market, like Underlight, Eventide, uh, uh, Guild Hall, Yellow Ribbon, uh, Euphony, and Tea Leaf.
Okay.
And on the Google Docs, I have PDFs of the map, which have a bit higher resolution. You can zoom in and see the street names and see where things are, which
Oh, cool.
might be helpful to.
Yeah, that could be good to kind of pick out exactly how we operate.
Yeah. Now, with our lair, do you guys think we definitely have water access? Do we have street access as well? Do we open up to like a manhole cover in the street, or like the back room of a merchant? Because I know like Tiffany kind of like the back room of a merchant too. Like, do we open into the back room of Silas's shop or something like that?
I think so. I think we can. I see something like that, like an opening up into the back of a shop, even if it's not mine, rather
Yeah.
than a manhole, because there's no dignity there.
Yeah. No, I like the idea of it opening into the back of a shop, or I mean, eventually if we decide to take on like a tavern or something, we might like buy the building next door to that shop to have a tavern run out of.
And actually, I almost kind of like the idea that it does go out of Silas' shop, but he will never sleep in the lair. He always has to the ostentatious apartment.
Hmm. I dig the tavern idea though, like, and this idea of like having stairs to the basement that actually lead to this underground grotto. There's a
Yeah,
level of Dungeons and Dragons Online that had a dungeon like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Reminiscent.
I like the
is
idea that
there a
it's
bark
like
skin ability?
what's that?
What was that?
Is there a bark skin ability?
Oh,
I'm drinking it.
But no, I think I really like the idea that it's maybe I don't know if Silas is the one that discovered it or whatever, but he could have, especially I could totally see him paying somebody or doing it himself or paying somebody and then killing them, um, to like expand his cellar if like he had a cellar that was like where he stored his legitimate business goods.
Yeah,
For
like
his
someone doing like a digging job
uh-huh,
at night, and just doing routine construction.
just
We
doing
gotta
Yeah.
routine construction.
make sure we don't
Sounds
sink into the canal.
Yeah,
sounds very long-term project. Like I
right.
feel like I could probably do
Well,
something
that
like
was
that.
long-term project pre.
Yeah,
Like I said, I think a long-term job in-game could be like hooking it up to a tavern and like
right.
because
Right.
there might
Yeah.
be a tavern next door. There might
Mhm.
be ones like.
Exactly. Well, and
And like,
that's in the expansion of the turf and stuff. There's things you can do where you can gain a tavern or you can gain like a sleep. I don't even actually what are ours.
Yeah. So let me mention that because I didn't go over that in our last one.
Okay.
So because it's recorded, people can reference this video for
Yeah.
it as
I
well.
actually have my character sheet up so people can see
Awesome.
what it is.
So we didn't talk about this kind of grid we have right last time.
okay,
And so what this is so when you level up your crew, so you can see down below, much like your playbook, you have this crew advancement and you have XP triggers for your crew. So for us, if we execute a successful smuggling or acquire new clients or contraband sources, we can mark XP and et cetera, et cetera. And when we fill all those up, we can either take one new special ability or we can take two new layer upgrades or crew upgrades. This grid, however, the way you go about getting this stuff is by pulling scores, right? So looking up from our layer, if you want a luxury fence, which is +2 coin for each high class target score you pull in the future, you need to go on a score to acquire that. That is a game,
Ooh,
right?
okay.
And so that's where I say, like, you guys, I won't have. There are times I won't have like a campaign planned out. You guys could come to the table and be like, we need that luxury fence. Let's go get it, right? But here's the thing. So, um, everything, as I've said before, everything in Night Market is owned by everyone else. So all these things that you don't have access to yet are owned by another faction. So when you go about it, it'll be a conversation of who are you hitting for this, and that operation will cause a -2 to that faction as you steal that thing from them. This includes turf as well. So like we started with a few factions. As the game progresses, we're going to be all over the place with a bunch of factions. Potentially, however, an enemy of that faction might get a +1 rating with us, as they're like, hey, we see what you're doing, and we like that, right? Um, you can see that there's these like little passageways to each of these uh, boxes, kind of forming like a maze. Um, what this does is if you are following a passageway, so like if we went from layer to our first level of turf to the left, and then up to side business above that turf, these are just normal scores. You're following the path perfectly fine. However, you don't need to follow the path. You could go, I want layer and I want to go warehouse in the bottom right hand corner. This becomes a massive heist. So this is something you'd have to let me know in advance, and this is a multi-part score to set yourself up for taking a warehouse, right? Like this is a big deal. Um, but other than that, the same rules applies. You're taking it from someone, you're going to take a rep hit from them.
Hmm.
The turf, as I was explaining to Pal when he asked, are essentially attack. Like that from an RP perspective, they're awesome, right? You're getting more turf and stuff like that. But you can only have a tier rating equal to the amount of turf you control. So like you need to get those turf in order to raise up in tier.
Is there a way for us to scout these things? Is that like a long-term mission thing that we can do to like figure out for our purposes? Can we scout like what is the warehouse or what is the turf that we would be taking to know which faction it would be going after?
Yeah. So there's there's a couple things we could do. Like I'm perfectly fine, as I said, like we're all kind of in this creating the story together. So like I'm perfectly fine if as players we want to just have a kind of out of character conversation of like, oh man, what if we found a warehouse that was housed by the bill hooks, like the butchers, right? Like that could be cool. Let's go and do that. And if that's something we want to do, that's great. If we want to keep it more RP, there's two ways we could handle it. One, I think doing a downtime project to gather information could be fine. Like do like a 4 or 6 o'clock segment of, locate suitable warehouse or something like that and get the information about it. Or that could also be actions taken in free play. Like there is a gather information move where you can roll whatever you want to roll to gather information. So let's say, like with a warehouse, that's probably, because it's so far away and it's a larger heist, that's probably going to be a more long-term project to find out, okay, what depth do we need to take before we take the warehouse?
Yeah.
But if you're going luxury fence, that could be like, hey, this game, we want to go after the fence. I'm going to gather information, find out what fences are available, who they're tied to, and maybe we can make a decision about who we go after.
Okay.
It like in that free play portion of the game.
Nice. I mean, I am also very interested in potentially pushing one of those at some point. I just think it'd be really good to get either like a side business or
We are ambitious.
Exactly, we are ambitious. Or getting a cover operation could be good, just because then it would reduce our heat overall. Would kind of
Yeah, I don't
give
want.
us that. You don't want that. You want the heat.
I'm a legitimate businessman and pillar of the community.
Oh yeah. See, so yeah, you don't. Yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, so
Yeah,
I think
you have a cover operation. We do not.
yeah,
Right?
the
Yeah.
gang doesn't.
I certainly have never engaged in human trafficking, ever. Certainly not of my own people.
Yeah, see, Cole probably wouldn't care if you said just human trafficking, but if it comes out that it was Scovelanders, then it'll be a problem. Um,
You see someone like who found it out, like I'm going to be like, you know, human trafficking. Yeah, sure, okay, whatever.
right,
Of Skulllanders.
right. Um, so we still need a name, right, for our gang, overall gang.
Mhm.
Um, and then we need a name for our boat.
Yeah.
Okay.
I put forth, Tiffany's suggestion for one of our gang names was the Emerald Nighthawks, and I think Emerald Nighthawk is a cool boat name.
I like
I
that one a lot.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Because
Uh,
that's the other thing is like the single name that's a person could just be a nickname that we use while we're on a score too.
well,
Yeah,
you
or
could,
likewise just being like, hey, I left it in
It's
the
over to
Emerald,
Sheila.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or I left it
and
with
if
M.
people like, well, yeah,
Mm.
that's me.
It is. Dang, that's true. I didn't
Yeah.
think of that, but I do
That
think,
could be part of the illusion.
right? No, I do like expanding our territory a little bit and getting some things going.
I could see, and probably a darker way than it's portrayed in the films, but the Emmeline Silas dynamic being like the George Clooney Brad Pitt dynamic in Ocean's 11. I don't know who is who in this. I don't know who's asking,
I
you think
think
I need one more? We need one more. I'll get one more.
yeah. So I think the Danny Ocean character is, and I was reading up on people who had played spiders, uh, so the Danny Ocean character is probably the spider because it's talking about how in their games they were having trouble having the spider like engage in scores because he's not typically his abilities usually don't involve breaking into something, hurting someone or something like that. And someone was like, "No, you Danny Ocean them." So like at some point they show up in the heist and you didn't realize they were going because of that they had pre-planned that will happen in flashback.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see it exactly that way. Where and like, do you think we need one more? Yeah, yeah, we need one. You think we need one, and especially because I think you would be the silent one too in that situation of the. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I like that dynamic better than the other one that I know your character is influenced by would be like the Gus Fring Walter White dynamic, which I think we're
Yeah.
probably on better terms. Like if
Yeah,
anything, I could
well,
see the
well,
Gus Fring
I feel
Jesse
like if
dynamic in
you're
later
Walter
seasons.
White in that relationship, you're the one who doesn't let your pride fuck with you, and we can
Yeah.
do this well. I also think because at first I was curious at how many of you guys are into Stupor? It felt like a lot.
Ooh,
Yeah, it did feel
Peter
like
and I.
Oh, just Peter and you, because there was a point where Gus was very clear with Walter about never trust a drug addict, and I thought he might go that direction. But I think that's something he in particular doesn't care about. To him, indulging in something like that is a luxury, even if it's not a luxury he indulges in. Or that would be his view of it, but not one. Yeah, um, yeah, um,
No, I like it. I think that's really good. I like all of that. Can't think of anything else. That's
All right. Well, thanks, Nate. I appreciate hearing about your character. Super pumped to
yeah.
see
I'm
you in
looking forward.
action.
Yeah, this will be a lot of fun, and I do like. It's okay to have a few people gone for a session. The
yeah,
hmm
stuff.
Yep. And I think the way things will work, right? Like whoever is in the game when the crew levels up can determine how they spend that XP, and
yeah,
everyone else will have to be comfortable with it. Because the idea is like, if you miss those games, you might come back and be like, oh man, we have a vault now, and like you might be like, oh, I was hoping we'd get something else. You could be like, sweet, we have a vault, but like I
right.
think
Yeah,
that's how a criminal organization would work, right? Like
Yep.
whoever's got the money to do something's gonna be like, I'm doing a thing now, right?
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
I think you could also like
Yeah,
advocate ahead of time and be like, hey guys, I think we should do X. But yeah, if you're not there,
Sure.
then
And like feel free to talk about it in chat, and I'm sure like in character there'll be times, right, when people like we need to secure our lair.
yeah. Like there could be one game where like, hey, like someone saying, hey, I wish we do that, and then they might not be there the next game, and we might not necessarily have any ideas. And be like, oh, let's do what they did
right.
or wanted.
I do like the fact that we can get eventually a fleet of vehicles. I like the idea that because we have the one boat currently. At some point, I do imagine us having several like smaller boats.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we can personally, right, get two vehicles
Right.
and then armor those vehicles. So like I was saying, we could have our medium steamship and like retrofit it into ironclads if we want,
Yeah.
that kind of pseudo submarine style play. And then we can get cohorts. We can upgrade them if they're rovers, which they ought to be. We can upgrade them to elite rovers, making them even better. And then we can give them all boats. Like we could. This is, we'll probably need a bit higher tier to get there, right? We'll need a few level ups, but
Right.
dang, dude,
Yeah,
we'd be a force to be reckoned
know,
with at that point.
yeah.
Well,
Like,
especially in the fact that Duskfall is a canal city. Like, it's not, maybe as big of a canal city as like Venice or something, but it's very clearly like, but it's much more a canal city than say even London is, right? Where
Oh
like
yeah.
there's so many rivers that are going through this city.
Well, and it's hard to see on the main map there, but
Hmm.
like Silk Shore, for instance, it's almost like all that black is almost no road. It's almost all canals. Like you
Oh
can see it
wow.
on like the individual map, but like
Yeah.
um and granted, depending on our boat size, there might be some canals that are a tight fit or are too small for us.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, having a boat is kind of great because we have access to pretty much everywhere in the city and like access to the Deathlands via water routes, right?
is that a
Yeah.
place we want to go?
Uh, I wouldn't recommend it like straight out the gate. Like that's something you probably want to prep for, but
Yeah, because it sounds like there's death there.
Yeah, it's like the Western
There's
Plaguelands.
probably weird stuff there too. You never know.
yeah, definitely weird stuff. Like and Powell,
That's
the
true.
Hound has stuff that like he can like survive in the Deathlands and is like prepped for it. That's one of his character upgrades. So
Yeah.
who knows? He might help lead us on an expedition one day or something.
What was the name of his vice?
Weird.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah, and it's specifically he goes to a place called the Arcane Stacks, which is like a library that you pay, and based on your patronage, you can explore and read and stuff like that.
And what was Charles' vice?
Pleasure.
Oh, okay. Silas can respect that.
Yeah.
And Cameron's, while weird, is faith in the
That
Forgotten
one,
Gods.
I found that one out too. On top of the vengeance, Ben would be like, "You are going to be such a liability. Oh my god!"
It's so good though.
Like as a noble, he can kind of understand family obligation. Like I can see that, but should like just be more.
But he's Batman.
Oh no, I meant with Nebra.
Oh, with Nebra.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
You gotta commit all the way, and I will help you realize that's the best option.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that should wrap us up, guys. If there's more questions, feel free. The chat's always open. So post stuff there. Otherwise, yeah, continue to think up a name for the gang. That's something we want to hopefully settle on soon. Though, if we don't have it by Sunday, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
All of Sunday the game. Okay, the score is the name.
Yeah.
Is
How
it
do you want
is
to
it
achieve
make a
this?
name for yourself? Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Alrighty. Thanks.
Thank you.